Hello and welcome to another episode of the County Cricket Podcast in association with our friends at Bear Crickets. I'm your host, Aaron, aka the Cricket Connoisseur, and joining me on my left for today's incredibly special episode of TCCP is none other than Northamptonshire County Cricket Club icon, Rob Keogh. So Rob, first things first, mate, thank you very much for coming back onto the podcast, a second appearance on TCCP. It's wonderful to welcome you back onto our platform. I've got to ask, mate, how's your day been so far?
Yeah, good, thanks, and thanks for having me back. I know it's nice to be asked onto these things and give back a little bit. I keep an eye on what you do on social media, so it's nice to be welcome back. It must have meant I did a good job first time around, I'm sure. So,
Well, you certainly did.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, but no, day's been good. A couple of testimonial meetings this morning, and then got a meeting at the ground again this afternoon. So it's sort of start of pre-season time. So we've got the old do's and don'ts meetings coming up, and I've sat for a fair few of those. It's just pretty regulation. So yeah, it shouldn't be too stressful.
No, it shouldn't be, but it's a weird time of the year, isn't it, actually, November, because we've had part of the off-season. It's technically still the off-season because it's winter, but everyone's starting to get back into the flow of things and the swing of county cricket life. It's quite a strange time of year, but in terms of the off-season, have you had a nice one?
Yeah, it's been nice, actually. I do enjoy October and start of November. It's nice to have 6 weeks off to just switch off and refresh. It's been slightly different for me this year with the testimonial coming up in 2024, so I'm trying to be as proactive with that as possible. I know you said you spoke to Ollie. He's got one with Warwickshire as well, so I'm sure he'll be the same as me, trying to be proactive and trying to make it fun. But no, it is always nice to have a break and switch off from cricket, but it is always a shock to the system the first day back in November. I always seem to get fatter and slower every year. So we've got a new strength and conditioning coach starting this year as well, so I'm sure he's going to have some challenging drills for us this winter to try and get us fitter and stronger.
Absolutely, because before you know it, it's the season again, isn't it? That is how the county system works. It's quite remarkable, isn't it? We all moan over the winter and say, oh, it's going too slow, and then bang, blink of an eye, it's March, it's April, you're preparing for the new season, and all of a sudden it's the county championship again. It's quite nice, really. But in terms of that testimonial, Rob, before we get into our chats about your career at Northampton to date, just for those who don't know, what goes in to the planning and preparation of a testimonial year?
I guess it's fairly personal on how you want to do it. I'm in the process now of doing a brochure for the year. I'm sure that's fairly common. So reaching out to the club sponsors, personal contacts. We have a committee in place who will also reach out to their contacts, trying to get articles from various different players, from all different sports, really. I've just been lucky enough that Courtney Laws has done an article for me. He's a Northampton boy. He's got his testimonial this year as well. Reaching out to those sort of people, gathering articles, gathering sponsors for the brochure adverts and stuff. So it's actually a bit of a eye-opener for life after cricket. It's definitely gave me a bit more confidence to pick up the phone and speak to people, and I can definitely use that when my cricket career is over, I think.
100%, because that is part and parcel of the testimonial, isn't it? About setting you up for that life away from the professional game. And in terms of the testimonial itself, have you got a website or any socials that we can just plug before we get into the episode?
I have, actually. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's nice and simple. It's just Rob Keogh 2024. That's the website and the socials. There's actually not much on there for now. The website's up, but it's just a bit of a holding page at the minute where you can sign up with your email address. And social medias will just keep people up to date with the events and what we have going on. So it's an exciting year. I'm hoping to have some fun and hoping to give back a little bit to the supporters who, have helped me throughout my career.
Absolutely. And folks, if you want to go and check out those socials and of course the website, we'll leave the links to those in the podcast description below. It's always nice to help out. And in your case, Rob, It's thoroughly deserved, so happy to help in any way that we can as well. But we're not just here to discuss your testimonial year, are we, Rob? Instead, we're here to discuss and look back on your glittering career at Wantage Road so far. So before we get into the main content of the podcast, which will of course surround the East Midlands County and the Tudor Rose of Northamptonshire County Cricket Club, I want to take it all the way back to the origins of the Rob Keogh cricketing story. So what were your first ever memories of cricket, either playing or watching this simply sensational game?
It was my dad, actually. So he played for Dunstable Town. Saturdays and Sundays he gave his weekends up to play for Dunstable, and I remember just going down watching him play. People he played with had kids similar age, so we would go down, mess around, mainly with the football actually, just go down, have a kick around, watch our dads play, and just wanted to play from there really, and then got into cricket myself. Obviously joined the Dunstable age group setups, and just sort of got picked for Bedfordshire at a young age, 10, and then got scouted by the Northants Emerging Players Programme, which they bring players from the surrounding minor counties up and hold like an open sort of trial. So I think from the age of 12 I was involved up at Northants, and Kevin is he must have seen something that he liked in me, and I then moved my age group cricket from Bedfordshire over to Northants at 15, and worked closely with a guy called Phil Rowe, who was my age group and EPP coach. He then got promoted to second team and academy coach and assistant coach, which was good for me. It was a familiar face and someone who I'd worked with from such a young age. And then obviously Rips was my academy coach when I first started, and he then went on to be head coach. So it was nice to have those guys who had seen me from such a young age up until being the player I am today, I guess.
And before we touch upon the player that you are today, Robbins, we do discuss Northants and the influence of David Ripley, a former podcast guest and an absolute guru when it comes to cricket coaching, one of the great men on the county circuit. In those formative years, you mentioned your dad and his involvement at Dunstable Town. He was a massive inspiration in those formative years. But aside from your dad, who in the professional circuits and the international arena maybe did you look up to in those formative years? Did you have any role models, any icons, any influences who really impacted a young Rob Keogh?
I always liked, obviously, the classics. You've got, the Pontins of this world. And I was actually a big Michael Clarke fan. I don't know why, something different. Really enjoyed him. And actually Ian Bell. And I was lucky enough to play a few times against Ian Bell, which is nice. And I think I got him out in a pre-season game. So it's nice to sort of, get your heroes out and actually play against them, which is nice. And I had a chance to play with Michael Clarke in Australia, actually. I played for his club side, his grade side. And luckily enough, the year I was out there, he turned out and played a couple of games. So got to share a dressing room with him and have a good chat to him. I think he was Australia captain at that stage as well. So, it was a nice moment.
Certainly sounds it, and quite good company to have in the same dressing room. Michael Clarke, a very, very successful Australia captain. And to be honest, Rob, I was going to follow up that question by saying, who would your dream next session be with those three cricketers? So Ricky Ponting, Ian Bell and Michael Clarke. But you've already played with Michael Clarke and you played a lot against Ian Bell, so it kind of makes the question slightly redundant. So instead of that question, I wanted to touch upon Michael Clarke in particular, because as you've spent that time in close proximity, having conversations with him, what would you say was the biggest thing that you learned from that time alongside Michael Clarke?
It was slightly different, actually, because it was actually made such a big issue in Australia that he had gone back to play grade cricket. It turned out he needed to prove to Cricket Australia that he was fit enough to play in the India Test series coming up, and there was no Shield or state cricket on at the time. So the only thing he could play was grade cricket, and there were so many people that had turned out to watch, media. I think he actually felt comfortable and safe in the dressing room away from the carnage that was outside. Constantly being asked for interviews, autographs. So I think he quite enjoyed the fact that he was in the dressing room just being normal. We didn't really touch on anything cricket related. It was more just a normal chat. I actually played against him the following year when Australia had the tour game, and we played against them. And he remembered me, which was nice. So I must have had a positive impact on him. I don't have that on many people. So we just sort of caught up, asked how each other were, and nothing really in depth. You can just tell his knowledge of cricket's there. He spoke in the dressing room tactically about the game that we were in. You can just tell he's an Australian cricket captain. You can tell his knowledge of the game was there, and he just came across like a nice guy.
That is excellent to hear, Rob. And again, before we get into our chats about the professional circuit and we talk about your time in county cricket, we have to speak a little bit about your time at Bedfordshire, because that is your home county and you did represent the national county side in age group cricket. So in terms of those years, how pivotal, how important were those years spent in the Bedfordshire age groups?
Very important. I mean, it creates the pathway for any cricketer, and being from Dunstable, it's a small town. Guys going on to play for Bedfordshire, it's actually quite a big deal for those guys. Minor counties play such an important role in cricket in general. They were good to me. They gave me a debut, a professional, a minor counties first team debut when I was young. I think I was only 16, maybe. And it was a decent standard, to be fair. And playing that at a young age, getting used to competitive cricket, and even the age group stuff, we had a pretty good age group side, to be honest. We had guys who have gone on and actually played professional cricket themselves. We had a guy, Christian Davis, played for Northants, and I think he ended up at Sussex for a little bit. James Kettleborough was at Middlesex, Northants and Glamorgan. We had a good side. We used to beat some of the bigger counties back then. It was a long time ago. We were 12, 13, and I'm not sure it really has too much of an impact. But, we were a good side and we were all good mates. And, it is important, and I owe a lot to Bedfordshire, and hopefully I can give back a little bit. I've played for Bedfordshire recently, actually. I always, if I get a chance, whether it's I've been injured and I need to get some cricket in, or if I haven't been selected and I'm, not got anything on, I've played for Bedfordshire. So I know they've got a lot of respect from the guys who have come through that system. Alex Wakely won. He played for Bedfordshire this year. He retired from cricket and found himself playing for Bedfordshire. So I know, they look after their players well, and people want to give back to them, which is nice.
It certainly is, and I completely echo that sentiment about the national county sides, because they are a very, very important bedrock for a number of people's careers. And in terms of your time with the county, Rob, what would you say was the highlight from your time at Bedfordshire?
Definitely just making friends that I still speak to today, and just having fun. And they sort of gave me the opportunity to be a professional cricketer. So it'd definitely be that. Yeah, I haven't really got a bad word to say about them, to be honest. I always, if I get a chance to go down and watch and support and show my face, there's always familiar faces there that I've grown up with. So it's just nice to give back to them as much as I can.
It certainly is. And to be honest, that's a very, very refreshing attitude to have, because it's almost like, as you've mentioned, giving back, isn't it, to the team which have given you the foundation to go on and have the career that you've had. And talking of that career, Rob, we have to speak now about your time at Northamptonshire County Cricket Club, because, as you mentioned beforehand, you started off at Dunstable Town Cricket Club, then moved up through the Bedfordshire age group system, and then switched over to Northants via the EPP and Phil Rowe. So in terms of that initial opportunity, you mentioned about the swap, but how did that first opportunity first materialise at Northants?
Just that phone call. Dad got a phone call. I think it was actually for a guy called James Knott, who's head of cricket at Stowe. And then a guy called Dave Mercer, who was involved in Bedfordshire age groups, who obviously had links with Northants and other counties. And Dad got a phone call asking me to go up. Northants were holding a sort of an EPP trial day for guys outside the area. And so we made the journey up, and I didn't really know what to expect. I was 12. I didn't really know anything about professional cricket or professional environments. All I knew was Dunstable and Bedfordshire. So turning up to the ground, walking out, seeing the stands was all a bit like, wow, this isn't a club ground. This is like, there's big indoor school. And it was like, wow, yeah, I want to be here. And that sort of inspired me to try and work hard. I wanted to go back. They made the environment fun, welcoming. It was great. Being such a young boy to have that opportunity was amazing.
It certainly was. And you mentioned about the stands and the big indoor school and the fact that it is a first-class cricket ground, one of only 18 in terms of the main HQs in county cricket. What was your initial impression and what were your first reactions like to that experience at Northants? Because going from Dunstable, which is very much a club ground, and then the national counties, it is a completely different system, isn't it? A completely different setting. So in terms of your first reactions and initial impressions of Northants, what were they like?
Yeah, exactly that. I walked from the car park just to have a look at the ground and just couldn't really believe that there was stands and, that cricket. I didn't know anything about professional cricket, really. I was always a big football fan, didn't really pay much attention to cricket. I played it and enjoyed it and would watch England, but I didn't really know anything else. So to turn up at the ground and see stands and the indoor school with pictures of players up, and it was a bit like, wow, yeah, this is something I can get used to.
And you certainly have in the years that have followed, as we shall touch upon in due course, Rob. But before we do, it's funny that you mentioned football, because I'm not sure whether or not this is a massively known fact or not, but I did find it during my research for this podcast. But when you were younger, you did actually have a youth contract at Luton Town FC. So in terms of the balance between those two sports, first and foremost, how did you balance your time in cricket with your time in football? Was that quite difficult, per se?
Yeah, it was. When I got picked for Luton, I was really young, actually. I got picked for Luton at 7, which is an incredible age to be picked up by a professional football team. It just blows my mind, really. But I was lucky enough. I grew up a few doors down from a Chelsea and Luton legend, Kerry Dixon, and I sort of had no choice. His son was my age. We went to school together, and I almost had no choice but to get into football. He set up a junior team in the area and got into football. And next thing you know, I'm at a Luton trial, and Dad got a phone call saying I've been selected for the Luton age groups. And it got to, it did get tough when you get to sort of 13, 14 and all your sports at the weekend. It was going from cricket straight to football, or football straight to cricket, missing the rushing off after. It was getting to the point where, I'd have to, as soon as the final whistle went, I had to run back to the changing room, get my cricket stuff on, jump in the car and go. So it was tough, but, at that age, you just love sport. You just want to play sport. So I obviously loved every minute of it, but it just got to the stage where it was time to commit to one or the other. And I know I said it to you before we went on air. It was just, I was never going to be a professional footballer. And cricket was going all right at the time. So Luton asked me to choose between football or cricket. It couldn't continue. And I chose cricket, broke out of a contract with Luton, and yeah, the rest is history. But yeah, I'm not sat here saying, I'd be out there at Kenilworth Road now playing for Luton in the Premier League, because there was absolutely no chance. But playing all these sports as a young lad gives you skills for every sport. So I was just lucky enough to play in that environment.
Well, I'm really, really glad that you've just touched upon that then, because that was my next question about transferable skills, because this is something which has cropped up time and time again on this podcast and does in just wider sporting conversations. So when you look at some famous cricketers, right, I think first and foremost to A.B. de Villiers, right, he played hockey in South Africa, and he's even been quoted as saying that it's helped him in terms of his batting. Kevin Peterson played an awful lot of sport, tennis, hockey, you name it. Kevin Peterson played the lot. So in terms of those transferable skills, what were those skills, do you think, which transcended the sports of football and cricket?
I don't really know. I'd imagine it definitely helped my fielding, being quicker across the ground. Football, you need a low centre of gravity, you need to move quick. So I think it's probably helped my fielding, definitely. Fitness, football is a different sort of fitness to cricket, so I'd imagine that would have played a part. I don't really know, to be honest. I don't really know. I'd say mainly fielding and, being quick on your feet, being able to move quickly in different directions, definitely would have helped my fielding.
And also the cliche one, which is teamwork, isn't it? Because it is another team sport. Yeah. So improves communication, improves leadership skills, you name it, basically. That is why at such a young age, it is definitely recommended to have a wide plethora of sports that you choose and not just specialise in one from an early age. But just one final question, because I'm a massive football fan myself. Who's your favourite ever footballer?
Oh, Frank Lampard, yeah. Kerry made me support Chelsea, basically. So I am a Chelsea fan, even though, Luton just around the corner. But I grew up watching Chelsea. Kerry took me to Chelsea training ground a few times to meet the players. So I've actually got a nice little selfie with Frank Lampard from when I was about, real young. I've got that and a Gianfranco Zola selfie that I've still got somewhere. So I'm a Chelsea fan, and Lampard's obviously Chelsea legend, isn't he? So it's got to be Lamps.
Yeah, one of England's greatest ever midfielders. Still not over that ghost goal in 2010. Absolutely robbed. Yeah, against Germany, but it's one of them. Absolute legend of the game, Frank Lampard. And I say that as an Arsenal fan. Probably wouldn't be my favourite player when he was playing against us, but yeah, a very, very good midfielder, to say the least. But Rob, getting back on track then to our chat about Northants, we've got to talk about your debut for the Tudor Rose, because as is the case with any cricketer, your debut is always one of the most special days, if not the most special, of your entire career. So in terms of that day, walking out onto that cricket field and representing Northamptonshire County Cricket Club for the very first time, what can you remember about that day and the emotions surrounding that incredibly special occasion?
It was slightly different to normal, actually. I was only 18. It was a one-day game on Sky against Yorkshire, who at the time, Tim Bresnan was playing, Ajmal Shahzad was playing. They were both playing for England at the time. I was actually meant to be 12. I was in to be 12th man, and Mal Lloyd sort of pulled up a bit crooked at the early stages of the warm-ups, and I remember it just being a massive rush. I wasn't prepared to play. I wasn't thinking I was going to play. My parents were still in Dunstable, so they didn't know I was going to play. I then got the nod to say you're playing, and you're going to open the batting, which I hadn't done. I was batting sort of 5, 6, 7 in the twos at the time. I was still young, 18. I'd never opened the batting in a one-day game before. Got the nod saying you're playing. rushed off the field, got a message to mum and dad, so I was playing. They made their way up. Just opened the batting on TV against two England bowlers. I think I got 15. I remember taking a nice catch on the boundary off Jack Brooks. But yeah, it sort of gives you that taste of professional cricket under lights on TV. It was Pro 40 back then as well, so it sort of makes you want it more, I guess, the debut. It didn't go as I'd planned. I'd like to score more runs than 15 and obviously contributed a bit more, but it's an amazing experience, and the way it came about is slightly different. It's not the classic, you get told the day before, you can prep. I didn't get to have a net in the morning. I had to have a few underarms because it was that late notice, and it was straight out there. I didn't really have much time to think about it. So in an ideal world, it would have gone a different way and I would have found out slightly differently, but it is what it is, and it sets you up for your career.
It does, and that was completely out of your control, wasn't it? All you can do is go out there and and make your debut, but goodness me, that is not the ideal start, is it, in terms of the preparation? But with that being said, actually, that has come up quite a few times on this platform with players who have been told on the day. So, for example, Brad Curry didn't have a clue about his debut in first-class cricket, and then he went and took a fifer in his first game at Lords for Sussex. So it can work out sometimes. So the lack of preparation would have allowed some nerves to creep in, but then at the same time, because it was so on sets and so rushed, did you actually have any time for the nerves to kick in, or were you relatively calm on that day?
Obviously, as a young 18-year-old, the first thing that came to mind was it's on TV against two England bowlers. Don't embarrass yourself. I think it took me about 13 balls to get off the mark, I think. And that's when you start getting nervous because you don't want a long naught on debut on TV. But yeah, because it was so rushed, I didn't have time to sort of think about it for too long. I had a short time to get myself ready, and because I was opening the batting, it was get your kit on and straight out there. We batted first. There wasn't much time to think. And in the field, I didn't really get nervous in the field either. I just remember trying to enjoy it as much as I could. Ended up fielding pretty well. Took a couple of catches, one nice catch diving forward. But yeah, it was obviously you do get the nerves walking out to bat on your debut. Obviously, you're going to be nervous, but yeah, I can't really remember too much about it, to be honest.
Well, to be honest, that's quite common. It really is, because the adrenaline just kicks in, doesn't it? When you're on your debut as an 18-year-old, in particular on the Sky cameras, actually, that is not that common on this podcast. Usually it's just a normal game as opposed to a televised one. So, yeah. Definitely a memorable debut, to say the least, Rob. And again, this might be a very difficult question because there's been an awful lot of highlights from your time at Northants so far, but would you say that debut is the proudest moment from your time at the club to date, or has something in the years that have followed maybe surpassed that? Because you've had some incredible individual performances. 2016 obviously stands out from a club perspective as well, lifting the T20 Blast. So in terms of those career highlights, which one do you think stands out above all others?
Definitely the 2013 and 2016 T20 wins. I was involved in the 2013. I didn't play, but I was 12th man and fielded in every game. Don't know whether that was a bit of tactical genius from Rips trying to get some of the big boys off the field and sending me onto field, but we were such a tight knit group in 2013. It was like a group of mates playing, and everyone wanted the best for each other. And yeah, I was basically a fielder in that campaign, but I was made to feel like one of the lads, one of the 11, and to see the work that went in that winter. We targeted white ball that winter. The work that went in and the position the club was in at the time financially, to see Wakers, a very good friend of mine, lift the trophy, and see him and Rips, just that joy together was incredible. And then 2016 was a similar sort of thing. There was well-known troubles that the club were having financially. We were getting told regularly that, the club might not be here anymore. So, prepare for that if you can. For us to then win in 2016 with such a small squad was incredible. And they're definitely the highlights of my career. I think team success outweighs any individual moments for me. A debute's a debut. Everyone has one. But to lift trophies, not everyone gets a chance to do that. So they're definitely proud moments of mine.
Well, to be honest, Rob, I do quite like that answer. Team before the individual. It's a very, very important attitude to have. But we will talk about some of those individual performances, in particular one against Glamorgan, which does stand out, and I'd love to know a bit more about that particular game and that incredibly memorable performance. But before I do touch upon that, we'll start first and foremost with 2013, because even though you didn't play as big of a role in that campaign, as you mentioned, you were still involved as a 12th man and very much involved in the team from a fielding capacity. So in terms of finals day, I just wanted to ask about your memories surrounding that day, because it's a criminally underrated finals day. David Willey won the competition with a hat-trick and no one seems to talk about it. So in terms of your memories from finals day 2013, how can you remember and recall that fateful day at Edgbaston?
To be fair, the whole build-up is just incredible in itself. You go down there the day before, you have your training, you do all the media commitments. Well, I did, and the senior players did all the media commitments, and everything's being set up. And then when you get your kit on and you walk down the steps, and you just see a packed house, and the buzz around the ground, the atmosphere is it's incredible. And for that reason, Edgbaston is always going to be one of my favourite grounds, just to witness and be part of that amazing atmosphere I can't explain it really. It is something else. It's as close to a sort of football atmosphere as you're going to get, I think, in cricket terms. And it just slowly builds up throughout the day. So we've played, in the 3 times I've been to finals day, we played the first game every time. And so you sort of play, have a bit of time to kill. Some players stay and like to watch the second semi. Some go back to the hotel. I was always back to the hotel, have a chill. And then when you come back to the ground for the final, the noise just increases, where obviously the alcohol's flowing, it's hitting the systems a bit more. It just gets louder and louder. And then the finals are just, the back end of the finals are just incredible. We were unlucky enough to be on the wrong side of one in 2015, but to come back in 2016 and win it was, just amazing.
Well, let's talk about 2016, because that really was an incredibly, incredibly special day for Northamptonshire County Cricket Club, beating Durham by 4 wickets in the final. In terms of that day, in terms of that occasion, this time you were very much active. You were part and parcel of the winning team in that final, Rob. What can you recall from Finals Day 2016? Because that has to be up there, doesn't it, in terms of career highlights?
Oh, I think for me, it's at the top. Definitely. I think in both games, we were 9 for 3 and 15 for 3, and witnessing some special innings. Ben Duckett in the first game against Notts, I think he got 90 odd. And then Cobby in the final, I think he got 80 odd. Again, being 9 for 3 and 15 for 3 in a final, it's never helpful, put it that way. But to see those guys stand up and Wakers again, I think he got 250s, I think, or so, that might have been 2013, but something like that. I know he played an anchor role in both games and let the other two sort of take the limelight. But But I just remember I took a nice catch off Andre Russell in the semi-final when he was hitting it all round Edgbaston, and we thought the game was going to be taken away from us. And yeah, a couple of quick wickets. I took a nice catch on the boundary in front of all the Northants fans, actually, which was really nice because it could have been the opposite end of the ground. But to take that catch in front of our home supporters was amazing, and the buzz around the place, and to then get into the final, anything can happen in those playoff games. So, they had a good team. Stokes was playing, Keaton Jennings playing, Mark Wood. I just remember being sat in the dugout. Myself and Steve Crook were batting 5 and 6, and 6 and 7 because Wakers was in at 5. Yeah, and we could see Woody warming up, and he was bowling far. We turned up to watch a bit of the second semi-final, and he was bowling at Bairstow route and balance, and he was bowling fast. He was warming up, and Rips just looked at Crookie and said, "You fancy it?" And he said, "No, send Keezy in next." And I was like, all right, thanks for that. I then went in and sort of saw us over the line, managed to hit the winning runs, which was so special. I only got 15, 20, but to hit the winning runs and sort of be out there for that moment when all the boys come charging off from the dugout is just, with fireworks going, it's just such a special memory to look back on my career.
And rightly so, Rob. It was an incredibly special moment, an extraordinary day for Northamptonshire County Cricket Club. And you mentioned the likes of Josh Cobb, who did score 80, Alex Wakely, spot on, anchored the innings brilliantly with 43, and then yourself scoring 16 not out from 11 balls, including the match-winning runs. I mean, what is that like? Did you ever imagine in your life that you'd win one trophy, let alone a second, and in particular for that second trophy, you'd hit the winning runs? It's what dreams are made of, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I could never imagine it. I've always sort of been a bits and parts sort of cricketer for Northampton white ball, especially at that time. I was a floater. I could bat anywhere between 4 and not bat, basically. So to get the opportunity to go out there and see us over the line and hit the winning runs, I never thought would happen. It's funny, actually. Rips did his speech the day before. We had a team room at the hotel and had a bite to eat and had a meeting, a bit of analysis and stuff. And Rips went around the room with obviously the players we had in the room at the time. And I remember he gets to me and says, obviously incredible fielder, can do anything, and going to take a match-winning catch. And for that to happen, to take that catch off Andre Russell to happen, I always remember that meeting with Rips mentioning it. And to be part of that squad, be part of that team. We had a few setbacks. We had Richard Gleeson was on fire for us in the group stages. He was then ruled out of finals day. Sando hadn't played much in 2016, came in finals day and put in 2 incredible performances. And then obviously you have the bigger names, the Rory Kleinvelds, the Azarilla at the time, the Graham Whites, the guys who had been there, done it. It was just incredible. The team was so close, and you could tell over that period of time it was such a good few years for the club. Obviously 2013 we got promoted as well as won the T20. 2015 we lost in the final and should have been promoted, and then 2016 we won it and again should have been promoted. We missed out by a point of promotion, and we actually got deducted 5 points for over-8 away at Notts in a absolute crazy game. We'd have been better off not turning up than coming away with minus 5 points. But yeah, just over that period, we were just such a tight-knit group. Again, the troubles that the club were having were everyone knew about them. The players knew about them. And because we were such a small squad, it almost helped us, really. We were all just really good mates and wanted the best for everyone.
Well, it's interesting you mention that because that's cropped up a lot on this podcast. In terms of Northants as a club, it's very much a tight-knit family, isn't it? It's more of a community club in comparison to, let's say, some test match hosting clubs who feel a bit more like an organisation just because of their size and their club organisation. But in terms of that Northants group in particular, I just wanted to touch upon two men in particular, right? Alex Wakely and David Ripley. Rips is an absolute legend. I had to bring him up on this podcast. In terms of their influence on your career, Rob, how important have those two been in shaping your career and also, I suppose, shaping that golden era of Northamptonshire cricket?
Yeah, incredible. I mean, Rips especially. He was obviously involved when I joined as a 12-year-old. He was the academy coach then, so that was his role, and I played for the academy with Rips playing as well. So I grew up with Rips. He shot me down as a wicketkeeper. I turned up as a 12-year-old wicketkeeper. He said that we've got a guy called Jack Johnson at the time, who was my age, playing in the age groups, who was the academy wicketkeeper. And they said there's a young lad called Ben Duckett coming through. If I carry on as wicketkeeper, I'm not gonna progress. Maybe try some off spin, and that turned out probably better than I'd have hoped. I don't think I sort of took my off spin too seriously until sort of 2015 sort of time. When I was playing in 2013, 14, 15, we always had James Middlebrook, who was our out and out spinner. We had Con DeLang before that, and Matt Spreagle came and had a few years with us. So it was always, I never bowled, and when I did bowl, teams were 400 for 5, and it was declaration bowling almost. But Rips was always a big believer in my bowling, actually, and it was almost myself that got in the way of that. Rips was always really keen for me to bowl and work my bowling, and would always encourage me to go and speak to people and improve it. I just wish I'd took his advice a little bit sooner, actually, rather than just saying, well, I don't bowl in the game. What's the point? And just focusing more on batting and fielding. I wish I did sort of take his advice and work on the bowling sooner, because it definitely would have helped my career. And, I back myself as a bowler now. I wish I did back then.
Well, you should back yourself as a bowler. And to be honest, Rob, you could not have, have set me up any better, to be honest, to talk about a particular performance from 2016. A very, very memorable one, to say the least, because it involved you taking your career best figures. 9 for 52. Absolutely unbelievable. They were the second best figures in the whole of the county championship in that summer. So in terms of that day, in terms of that game, what can you remember from that fateful fixture against Glamorgan at Wantage Road?
I remember Ben Duckett getting, I think he might have got a double 100 actually. I remember Ben getting a lot of runs, and Kieran Carlson got 5 for Glamorgan bowling some off spin. It wasn't actually meant to be a spinning pitch; it was meant to be a green seamer. But obviously, I think it was beginning of September, so it would have been a used pitch anyway. And obviously, Kieran getting 5 in the first innings, I thought, actually, I'm going to have a bit of a bowl here, spinning. And then I could have never have imagined what happened next. It just seemed to come out of my hand perfectly. I always say to Whitey now, he still owes me a beer for taking that one at the other end, not letting me get 10. But no, I was high in confidence from my bowling then. It was, not long after the T20 win, so the spirit around the place and the group was amazing, and everything was just coming off. Everything I tried, little subtle variations Rory Kleinveld, he used to think I was Ashwin. I'm sure he kept telling me, do this, try that, do this, and I had to say to him, Rory, mate, I just bowl normal off spin. But when I did try it seemed to come off that day. And yeah, just incredible day.
It really was. And you mentioned about Graham White. He took the wicket of Jacques Rudolph on that day. In terms of the other 9, Rob, which you took, can you remember the 9 Glamorgan batters?
Um, David Lloyd, I remember that one. Waggy, remember Waggy because he used to tell me he used to get involved when I was batting, so I remember Waggy. God, I'm telling you all the tail. I'm going to tell you the tail enders here. Hogan. Is it Bragg, left-hander?
Spot on.
Wally.
Yep. Mark Wallace.
Kieran Carlson. How many have I got there?
6.
Can't remember who else was playing. Yeah, God, I've hit a wall there, I think.
Well, to be honest, I think you've done incredibly well there. So the other ones were Owen Morgan, not the England captain,
Okay.
the Glamorgan all-rounder, Nick Selman, and the final one was Tim van der Hoogten.
That's the one. Okay, I've done quite well there to remember though.
I think you've done incredibly well, considering it was 7 years ago now. Flipping out, that's excellent memory. And then finished off with 4 for 73 in the second innings to finish with match figures of 13 for 125. So I just had to mention that, Rob, because it was your career best in the bowling department. I love my spin bowling, and obviously that is a very, very special performance. So had to bring it up on the podcast. And just one final performance, which I did want to touch upon before we touch upon the more difficult aspects of life as a county cricketer, is your double century against Hampshire back in 2013 at the age of 21. Again, what can you recall from that performance? Because at the time, Northants were 15 for 3 and in a bit of a pickle. And to say that you got them out of that pickle is a little bit of an understatement. So in terms of that game, in terms of that fixture, what can you remember about that fateful encounter at the Ageas Bowl?
Funnily enough, I can remember we had Batty on loan as a wicketkeeper for one game. I remember that for some reason because I spent a bit of time in the middle with him. But again, funnily enough, I'd actually been called in to the office probably 3 weeks before that. And it was obviously the club's finances, and we'd been told that out of 3 of us, that only 2 of us were going to get a contract. And performances obviously matter, but I knew at that time I was in the first team and played a little bit of first team cricket. Again, a good friend of mine, Rob Newton, was in amazing form and then snapped his Achilles or something, which then gave me the opportunity to come in to the first team and bat number 5. And I remember getting a couple of 30s and 40s in the games before. And I think I got a 60 at Edgbaston in a white ball game the week before. And I just felt in really good touch, but wasn't getting the big scores that I was sort of hoping for, and the big scores that I'd got in the 2s at the start of the year. And then, Hampshire, it's almost like nothing to lose. You're 15 for 3, everyone else is getting out. I just played with freedom, to be honest. Young 21-year-old, you don't really think too much about consequences, and obviously there's nerves there, but it just, one of those innings, I guess. And it turned out to be my first 50, which was my first 100, and obviously first 150, first 200. And I always have a joke with the boy. Whenever our lads get a CB round in, I'm first to jump all over that, because if I have to get a CB round in red ball cricket, it's been a good day. If I beat 221 and beat 9 for I'll be pretty happy.
I bet you would be. Flipping heck, it was a great innings. Really was. 221 from 383 balls, and that was the incredible thing about this knock. Your previous best was 44. I mean, it's some jump up, isn't it, from 44 to 221, and the game ultimately being salvaged, so Northants saving the draw. I just thought that was a wonderful knock, so had to touch upon that as well, Rob. But now that we've spoken at length about the highlights and the fantastic moments at Northants, we do have to touch upon the other side of cricket, which is the unfortunate aspects of the game, but it's part of it nonetheless, and that is the more difficult and tougher moments of this sport, because as much as cricket is the greatest sport on the planet, at times it can be very unforgiving, it can be a very lonely place and a very difficult place as well. in particular when you have bad performances or have an injury, for example. So in terms of your tougher moments at Northants, Rob, what do you say has been your most difficult time or difficult moments at the East Midlands club to date?
Definitely injuries are up there. In 2014, after the high of 2013, obviously we got promoted and won the T20. I think 2014 we probably won 5 games in total that year, across all 3 forms. It just, everything that could go wrong did go wrong that year with injuries. I broke a finger in the pre-season game before the first game of the year, which was a bad one, needed surgery, and I think I was out for 14 weeks. Got back on the field, ended up scoring 100 against Sri Lanka in the touring game. And then 2 games later, we were at Lords and I broke another finger, day 1, session 1, fielding. So I didn't get to bat at Lords, which was disappointing. Still haven't, actually. So hopefully we play at Lords this summer, because last summer we were at Merchant Taylor's. Yeah, and that was another 12 weeks out. So that season for me was back. It was get injured, miss the first chunk, get back, play a handful of games, and then get injured again for a big chunk. And luckily for me, I ended up coming back and playing the last couple of games and scored 100 against Sussex in the last game of the season in Div 1, which was nice. And definitely, last year was tough, actually, for the club. We obviously got relegated. It didn't go how we would have hoped. Not only relegated, we got beaten pretty badly in the Championship, which is tough. It's tough to take every week, and hopefully we can have a reset and build again for the summer coming and try and get back into Div 1, because I personally feel like the club deserves to be there. I feel like we've got some very talented players. It's just something didn't click for us, and we proved it actually at the back end of the year that we are a good side. We made Surrey follow on at the Oval, and not many people do that. Not many teams get the chance to make Surrey follow on at their home ground, and we made Essex follow on and beat them in the last game of the year. And we nearly got over the line at Edgbaston in an unbelievable game, actually. So, we know we can do it. It's just a shame it took until September for us to really kick in and show what we can do. Don't need to find any excuses, but we did have a few key players missing at the start of the year. Sando, obviously, everyone knows Sando and how good Sando is. To miss him for a chunk of games. Louis McManus was our vice captain and keeper. To miss him for, I think 5-6 games in the middle. And Procky, the captain, missed probably 5-6 games in the middle as well. So, they're big players for us. Being a small squad, to miss your captain, vice captain, and arguably best bowler is tough. But again, no excuses. We weren't good enough. We know we weren't good enough, and we're looking to build on that next year.
And that's all you can do, isn't it? The fact is, might have been relegated this season, but you can always come back up. That's the great thing about this 2-tier system, isn't it? The fact is, if you win the second division or even finish second, you'll be back in the first division in no time, and that's got to be the aim of Northants heading into the summer of 2024. And in terms of last season, Rob, I know that you've touched upon some of the struggles there, so in terms of injuries, in terms of some lacklustre performances in particular at the start of the season. I know this might be a pretty difficult question, but in hindsight and with the power of reflection, what do you think was the major factor behind Northants getting relegated? Was it the injuries? Was it the poor form at the start of the season? Was it something else? How do you reflect on that season and where things might have gone wrong, per se?
It's always easy to point fingers and find excuses. I just think we weren't good enough at the start of the year. We weren't good enough, and confidence is a massive thing. Losing becomes a habit, and the confidence of, very rarely do you have the majority of the team that low on confidence. It can be the odd player here or there if things are going well, but to have a group of batters so low on confidence, and a bowling unit again low on confidence, catches were going down, slips were low on confidence. It's for the majority of the team to be that low in confidence, it's only going to have a negative effect, and it almost just snowballed throughout the season. And we took it into the other formats as well, to be honest. It just sort of rolled on, and until it got to the time where September, we sort of set out a survival guide to try and keep us in Div 1, and we knew that it was a pretty tough ask, but we also knew what we needed to do, hence the bizarre game at Edgbaston where we set them 120 in 2 sessions. But we nearly got over the line. We showed some courage and we nearly got over the line there. And again, we went to the Oval the week after and needing a win, and we nearly won. Arguably, if it wasn't for the weather, we probably would have beaten Surrey. And we had probably 2 days washed out, a lot of cricket washed out. And then we win the game in 3 days in the last game of the year. But it shouldn't have gone down to September. We should have found ways to grind out results earlier than that to not leave us in that position.
And just touching upon that, because obviously at times defeat can actually be a very useful thing, can't it? Because it's where you learn your biggest lessons, and that's just something I wanted to touch upon before we talk about the future. What do you think was the biggest lesson, Rob, that you learned in the summer of 2023? Because it was a difficult season, but then again, at the same time, there were some really positive parts of the season. So, for example, the start of the One Day Cup, when Prithvi Shaw came in, all of a sudden the side seemed galvanised and wins were coming, but it was a very, very difficult season in many other ways. So what would you say was your biggest learning lesson from an individual perspective from the summer of 2023?
I think it's a big learning curve for some young players. I went through a similar thing at a young age in 2014 where we didn't win much and obviously got relegated. It just shows, as a young player, you just almost feel like you're free and you're invincible, if you like. So for them to, go through bad periods of form, losing games, it sort of humbles you a little bit. I actually heard someone say a good quote, actually, you're never as good as you think you are, but you're also never as bad as you think you are. Cricket's such a funny game. It's like, you could get a duck one week and then you go out and you get 100 the week after, or even an innings after. It's such a funny game. And, that the year just gone has been a massive learning curve for everyone at the club, not just players, young players, senior players, but I think everyone can learn from it. And, we got some really good young players who are going to have bright, successful futures, but they can learn from last year, and it's not always going to be rosy. And I think the biggest learning for me is that we weren't as together as a team as what I was certainly used to in the Northants dressing room, for some reason or another. But those sort of years definitely bring people closer together, and you've got to have everyone's back, and you have to want to play for the badge rather than sort of play for yourself. I'm not saying that people were going out there and playing for themselves, by the way, but there's a bigger picture to it, and you're representing the club and you're representing everyone in that dressing room, not just yourself. So there's definitely learning, and I think everyone's looking forward to putting things right again next year, actually, which is a positive.
It certainly is, and again, you've got some great pickups in the off-season with the likes of George Bartlett, obviously Prithvi Shaw coming back, George Scrimshaw, who is a very, very nice prospect, to say the least, very fast, and obviously the youth coming up with the likes of Rafi Weatherall as well, great young seam bowler to keep a very close eye on heading into the future. So there are definitely positives, but it's interesting you mentioned there, actually, Rob, the almost volatile nature of cricket, because it really is, and as a batter in particular, it really does swing violently at times, doesn't it? So There's never really this sense of balance in the world of batting. So in terms of that composure, in terms of keeping your cool and maintaining an even keel in the game of cricket, how do you maintain that focus, that composure, that level-headedness, given the incredibly volatile nature of batting?
I think it's a lot easier for me to say that now as a 32-year-old, having played for 12 years or so professional cricket. It's like I said earlier, you're never as good as you think you are, but you're also never as bad as you think you are. You can get yourself into some pretty rough places if things aren't going well, and it's just remembering you're actually not as bad as you think you are, and you're there for a reason, and trusting what got you to where you are, I guess. Like I said, I think it's easier for me to sit here and say that, having probably gone through all the emotions you can have as a professional cricketer, especially as a batter. Just trusting yourself, trusting your process, trusting your ability, trusting your technique, and trying to back it as much as possible. I think batters get in their sort of worst headspace when they're not trusting themselves and trusting their technique, and they're a bit tentative. It's certainly what happened to us, I think, as a batting group this summer, where people are low on confidence. You're never fully clear on your game plans, and it just snowballs. So that's one bit of advice I'll have for young batters. Definitely is you're never as bad as you think you are when you're in those bad moments. And also when things are going well. David Sales said to me, actually, during that double 100, I was 150 not out overnight, and he said to me, you got to cash in these moments, because you never know when you're out of form and you're not going to, you're struggling to get a run. So when you're in, get as many as you can and make it count. And I've always sort of said that to young lads. I do feel like 50 and 80, as some players see that as success now, whereas when I grew up, I was watching David Sales get 300. Big scores are what attracts people, and just to cash in when you're in, because you do never know when that run of form comes, and you're scraping the barrel to get double figures. So if you are on 100 plus, and just try and make it count, because they win games as well ultimately.
They do, and I think that's a wonderful piece of wisdom for any young batters out there who are listening to today's episode of the podcast. I think that is some wonderful advice, Rob, and just touching upon that concept of not being as bad as you think you are. Obviously something which does come into a factor nowadays, as opposed to the 2000s or the 1990s, is social media. So just before we touch upon the future, I did just want to talk about this, because we've spoken at length on this podcast about the great aspects of social media and the negative sides as well. Where do you stand in terms of the social media discussion? Because when you're playing well, obviously you feel like $1 million, don't you? You see the highlights on Twitter and Instagram and everyone's going crazy. But then on the flip side, when things aren't going great, it feels like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. So how do you describe or summarise your relationship with social media? Do you think it's overall a positive thing for cricketers, or maybe a negative?
My opinion on it is you have to take the rough with the smooth. Obviously, if things aren't going great, it's never nice to just have a flick through Twitter and see your name being mentioned in a negative way. But like you mentioned there, on the flip side, when things are going well and you flick through Twitter and you're seeing some nice comments, it is nice. I just think you have to be clever with it. Don't leave yourself open and vulnerable to criticism. I think if you're quite vocal on Twitter, you'll get more. I've never really seen it as a big issue. I know when I've had a bad game. I don't need someone on Twitter to tell me that I've had a bad game. I know that. And them telling me on Twitter that I've had a bad game doesn't necessarily affect me, but I can certainly see how younger players now who have grown up with that social media, I can certainly see how it affects them. It's just trying to learn that, it's not the be all and end all what some bloke behind a keyboard is saying, and almost trying to use it as motivation, I guess. But yeah, it's something that's never really affected me too much, to be honest. Like I said, I know if I've had a bad game, so I don't need someone to tell me. And if they do tell me, they're telling me something that I already know anyway. So it's it's not the end of the world.
Well, I am glad to hear that, because we have had a lot of players on this podcast who have had very differing experiences with social media, and at times it's difficult. I mean, I can't say that I fully can empathise because I'm not a professional cricketer, but I imagine at times it does get difficult when you are in a bad patch, you may be in a bad place outside of the game, and then all of a sudden you've just got a load of abuse coming your way. I can definitely see the double-edged nature of the social media beast, but it's just a case of, right, when you're not doing well, just put it to one side, log out of Twitter, log out of Instagram, just ignore the white noise. I think that'd be my advice. And I say that as someone who isn't a professional cricketer, but that's just how I would deal with it personally. And in terms of the conversation outside of social media, Rob, before we touch upon the future and end today's episode, just one final thing, a quite nice question I wanted to ask was about what Northants means to you, because you've been at the club now for well over a decade. It is your home club. You've made Wantage Road your place, really, in county cricket, and you've become a stalwart at the club over the years. So in terms of that badge, in terms of the Tudor Rose of Northamptonshire County Cricket Club, what does playing for the East Midlands outfit mean to Rob Keogh?
Yeah, it's obviously very special to play at your boyhood club, somewhere that took me on at the age of 12, and to go out there and represent them every time. It means a lot more when you win, and I'd hope to think that I've given back to the supporters of the club who have backed me for over a decade and supported me through the tough times, through the good times. It's just a brilliant club. It's a family club. It does mean a lot. They gave me that opportunity, so I'd hope to think that I've repaid them as much as I can, and I would just hope that the supporters can see that every time I cross the boundary rope, I give everything that I've got for the badge and to pay back what they gave me. They gave me the opportunity, like I said, so it only seems right that I give 100% every time I walk over the rope, whether it's bowling, batting or fielding. And I hope if you walk around the ground and ask people, I'd hope to think they say that they can see that when I play. So, yeah, it does mean a lot. It's very special to play for your homegrown club.
I can imagine it is, and to be honest, Rob, I think you've done a great job so far. The career isn't over by any stretch of the imagination. I know you've got the testimonial around the corner, but fingers crossed no retirements anytime soon, because still got plenty in the tank. 16 first-class career centuries for the club, 3 ones in limited overs as well, plenty of wickets. We mentioned that 9 for, and the emergence of your spin over the years, becoming a batting all-rounder as opposed to just a specialist bat. So, yeah, very, very excited, to be honest, to see what the future has in store for you, Rob. And talking of the future, what a fantastic way to transition into the final question of today's podcast. Rob Keogh, what are your future aspirations in this wonderful game of cricket? Because I imagine in the near future, it's promotion. I think that will be on everyone's radar at Wantage Road. But in terms of from a club perspective, from an individual perspective, what are you looking to achieve heading into the summer of 2024 and the years beyond?
You hit the nail on the head there. I think in the immediate future, it's definitely getting the club back into Division 1. I touched on it earlier. I personally feel like the club belongs there, deserves to be there, and are good enough to be there. So it's definitely getting the club back up to Division 1. And I've been lucky enough in my career to win some trophies with the club, so I'd love to experience that again, in any format, really. So just to try and add another trophy to the collection for Northants would be incredible. So hopefully that's not too far away either.
Well, Rob, it goes without saying, mate, but obviously myself and everyone associated with the County Cricket Podcast are wishing yourself and Northants all the very best heading into 2024 and the years beyond. I think I do make it quite obvious on this podcast sometimes. I do have a bit of a soft spot for the East Midlands outfit, and this year was rough. But then again, the future does look bright. You've got the offensive capabilities to get back into the promised land of Division 1. And to be honest, I do think that you'll make a very, very good go of it in 2024. So fingers crossed, Northants will be promoted, and who knows, another trophy on the horizon. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Maybe a T20 Blast or the Metro Bank One Day Cup. It's always lovely to add an extra piece of silverware into the trophy cabinet. But that does basically bring us to an end to what has been a fascinating episode of the County Cricket Podcast. Rob, before we say our goodbyes for the episode, do you have anything more to plug or promote? Any social media channels, websites, businesses, anything like that?
No, I don't. I won't bore you with that. You've already plugged the testimonial, which is very kind of you. And yeah, hopefully we can pencil in another time on the show, and I can sit here and talk about a successful season with hopefully a trophy or a promotion. So thanks for having me, and yeah, I look forward to hopefully that same call next year with some success.
Absolutely, mate. Well, you know you're always welcome back on the County Cricket Podcast at any time. And folks, I can't implore you enough, please do go and check out Rob's testimonial. He has been an absolute stalwart of Northants, gives an awful lot, both on and off the field, to the club. And if anyone is deserving of a testimonial, it is the man that I'm chatting to on the podcast today. So please do go and feel free to check that out in your own time. But that is essentially it from us two here at the County Cricket Podcast for today's episode. To each and every single one of you wonderful listeners out there, thank you ever so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the next one.